Hi folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Cult Mania we're taking a lovely trip into the British countryside with the classic folk horror, The Blood on Satan's Claw.
Blood on Satan's Claw.
Sometimes also known as Satan's Skin. Actually, I think it's Satan's Skin is the title on this release. Blood on Satan's Claw was released in 1971 and was directed by Piers Haggard. It sort of is part of the classic British folk horror trifecta that sort of begins with Witchfinder General, then you have this, then you have Wicker Man. And it's got all of the staples of that genre that you would come to expect. The plot of Blood on Satan's Claw starts out with a farmer who's out doing farmy stuff, and then he finds a skull in the earth. Not just any skull, because he goes, that is the skull of a fiend. It's got an eye, it's a bit hairy, it's a bit of an odd looking skull, so I can understand why he thinks that. However, he goes and gets the magistrate, comes back, skull's gone. And then things start going very, very strange in this little village. There's a woman who goes completely mad and attacks people. All of the children start offing one another and growing hairy bits because they want to offer their skin to Satan. Which ends with the magistrate sort of going into a big full-on fight with the devil himself, because that's really metal. The film was originally envisioned as being a sort of portmanteau style film where all of these things were going to happen separately, but then it was reworked into being a sort of straightforward narrative film, although it is still incredibly episodic. The first sort of 20-25 minutes of the film, apart from setting up the Satan skull, feel really quite detached from the rest of the film. But it does mean that actually quite a lot happens, and quite a lot happens quite quickly. So that's nice.
When the grave of the devil is disturbed by the plough, the satanic essence of evil wreaks violent and revolting revenge.
Acting-wise, this is very much an early 70s British horror film. You know, that it's got that very sort of stagey nature. There are some very, very dodgy accents going on. Everyone, you know, it's set in the past, it's set in the countryside, so everyone does their best to sound ye olde. And yeah, not to great effect. You very much get a sense that the costumes are doing a lot of the sort of grounding the film in an era more than the performances are. And those performances can be incredibly over the top. Patrick Wymark is very much the sort of, I would say he's the central character, except for the fact that he disappears for half the film. But he gives the sort of biggest performance in the film. He is the magistrate and very much walks around pulling stern faces, shouting at people, and sort of early on it looks like he's actually going to be a baddie. It looks like he's going to be the sort of Vincent Price Witchfinder General type character, but actually he ends up being the hero, which is a bit weird. But he does have a sort of gravitas to him, and despite the fact that he's overacting into the stratosphere, yeah, it's engaging. You sort of constantly are sort of drawn to him. Linda Hayden plays the actual villain of the film, Angel, who is the leader of the satanic cult. It's never actually sort of explained massively why she's the person chosen, or at least I can't remember it being. But she does a very good job. You do get the sense that she is menacing, but also you kind of get why everyone is doing what she says. She has fantastic eyes, and the filmmakers know it because, I mean, not only do they give her just lots of close-ups, but then they draw on these really heavy eyebrows that sort of draw you into her even more. I mean, I'm not trying to knock her acting, but you definitely do get the sense that she was cast because of how she looks, but it works really well for the film. You do kind of believe that if she told you to jump, you would say how high. I mean, the film is cluttered with other characters. A lot of characters turn up briefly and they never really do anything. I think this is probably a holdover from that portmanteau style, that they were going to be more important in their individual stories and now are just sort of relegated to turning up and saying, this looks like the work of Satan, and then disappearing again. But no, everyone's trying, and there are some characters that are quite entertainingly poor. They're quite funny. So yeah, acting, it's what you expect. I guess charming would be the way of putting it. Not the best acting, but charming.
Doctor, witchcraft is dead and discredited. Are you bent on reviving forgotten horrors?
How do we know, sir, what is dead?
The film benefits greatly from lovely locations. It's all shot out in the country and it looks really nice. There are some, nice old houses. It's very lush. It's lovely to be out in the greenery. I think, it's a lovely era in British cinema, because I think now when you think of British cinema, it's all concrete, and it's very nice to go back to that style. And it photographs so well on film that there is just something very enticing about the images, even if they aren't the most extraordinary sort of cinematography wise. There are some very, very nicely composed wide shots. Be prepared to watch a lot of tracking shots of like horses just going along a road. That happens multiple times. And the key thing that they do, and I know Piers Haggard said that this was the idea, after you've found the skull in the earth with the eye, the camera stays very low. You get a lot of low angle shots. That's probably one of the reasons that I think the magistrate looks like he's going to be the villain, because he's shot from really low, but everyone is. But I think it does have that idea of like, you're looking through the eyes of Satan, which is cool. There are some points where they move from tripoded shots to handheld stuff. It does feel a bit jarring, but you kind of forgive it, because you go, we're out in like a hill in a forest which is covered in roots. I wouldn't want to try and set up a tripod either. So you do get some shots that are a bit wibbly wobbly, but overall it works very well. It's a classic style of filmmaking that I don't think you really get these days.
Art thou ready to give thy skin tonight? Art thou ready?
The soundtrack for the film, you will instantly recognise, if you've ever seen the film before and someone starts playing, I think you'll go, oh, that's Blood on Satan's Sword. You can sort of instantly recognise it. It's well created. It doesn't always fit with what's going on. It's quite upbeat at times. Like I remember in the early stuff when there's the sort of mad woman, the score really doesn't seem to go at all. I think it's because there's this sort of quite kiddie nature to it, which I think they were going, because obviously later on you have like killer kids and stuff. I think it works when it goes with that, because it's this sort of juxtaposition and it really works. But other times it feels really quite out of place. I mean, instrument-wise, it all works. It's a lot of strings. There's some flutes, because it's a folk horror. You have to have flutes. And there's even some synthesizer stuff, and it works. And I'd quite happily listen to the soundtrack outside of the film. But there are just some sequences where you go, this doesn't work. This feels so distant from what we're looking at on screen. But like I said, every now and again it works, and that's almost more interesting than if it had worked all the way through or been completely like a misfire.
These dogs know how to tear the devil's heel.
The effects work in the film hasn't particularly aged well, but I mean, it is from 1971. What were you expecting? It's very much, there are some key things that they do, but they do them over and over again. There's a lot of, oh no, My back's itchy. I will lift up my top. Oh no, I have Satan's skin now, which is very hairy. And then there are a few points where you see that get cut off, and it's like it's a big hairy sticker with some red under it. You get the sense that it might have been alarming at the time. I don't even know if it would have played that well in 1971. I mean, I do like that I like that Satan is very hairy. And, I mean, slight spoilers. Satan does turn up, and he's one of the most bizarre representations of the devil that I've ever seen. I mean, like I said, he's very hairy, which is cool. And he's got the strangest face ever. And it's sort of like the soundtrack. It treads this weird line between being funny or somewhat cute, and then being quite unsettling as well, because you go, this doesn't look like anything that I've ever thought of before. It's got this very strange sort of nose-mouth thing going on. But no, it's quite fascinating, actually. It's worth seeing the film for its bizarre Satan. I will say, effects I don't think were the filmmaker's sort of priority, especially when it came to something that would be sellable for the film. That'd be boobs. There's quite a lot of nudity in the film, at least for this era. You know, I think nowadays you're probably going to think, oh wow, I've seen 3 naked people. But I think, you know, probably back in the day, actually, it did cause the film quite a bit of hassle. There's a key sequence that's set at night with a naked lady, and they darkened it back in the day. It isn't on this, you can see everything. But yeah, I mean, that scene must have looked ridiculous back in the day, because it would have just been basically looking at a black screen for a while. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to know whether they did anything with the finale, actually, because the big satanic worship thing is basically just a naked woman shaking her boobs for a little bit. And I mean, I'm no expert on satanic worship, but I think there might be a bit more to it than that. But I don't know. Answers on postcard, please. Yeah, there is quite a lot of... It definitely feels like that was where they were like, that'll get an audience in. There are a couple... Well, there is a scene that's quite uncomfortable. There is a rape scene that goes on for quite a long time. So if that is something that bothers you, I'd be aware that that is in there. It's very unpleasant. I wouldn't say it's gratuitous, but there's a lot of build up to it, and then it goes on screen for a couple of minutes. It's not something you want to see. So it's quite, like I said, it's not gratuitous, but just be warned if that is something that triggers you.
Blood on Satan's claw was like a horrible disease, highly contagious and deadly dangerous.
Now, I feel like I've been quite harsh on this film in this review, and I think a lot of the stuff that doesn't work about it for a modern audience would have been acceptable back in the day. And I think if you are a fan of folk horror, there are far worse films to watch. There's, you know, the more sort of campy nature in it is very entertaining, and I think there is genuinely like a brilliant concept in here. Like, the story isn't perhaps the best told it could be, but if someone did like a more modern version of this and kept the bones of the film, you could make something really creepy. This isn't it. This isn't particularly scary anymore, but I think the concept works really, really well, and I think that carries it as it is. And I do think you could do a really interesting retelling of this story. Also, after you've had the lady shaking her boobs in the finale, it does have a fantastically metal moment that I think that is one of the most sort of OTT final sort of minutes of film I can think of, and it's probably worth seeing just for that moment. So overall, yeah, it's a recommend. I think by the time this review goes up, the film should be on Shudder in the UK at least. So I'd definitely check it out. It's worth your time if you like classic British horror or are interested in folk horror. It's a very important film in that regard. So yeah, I'd check it out. But that is just my opinion. Have you seen The Blood on Satan's Claw or Satan's Skin? Both. Those are both brilliant titles, aren't they? Let me know down in the comments if you've seen the film, and let me know what you think. I would also say, if you are into your folk horror and just British folky stuff in general, this album by Gazelle Twin and NYX is definitely worth your time. It's a really cool sort of experimental album that does sound like the soundtrack for a folk horror film. So no, I would definitely recommend this. It's easily one of my favourite albums of the year, and I think it will appeal to a lot of the people that watch this channel. So yeah, it's called Deeper England. Check it out. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, and I shall see you next time.